on, Drax. Seriously, dude?
Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 has finally come out, and many people are talking about how great it is and how it is a return to form for Marvel movies in general. Now, I did enjoy the newest Guardians film, but I don't think it is a masterpiece that many are claiming it to be. The movie is good, but it does have many problems that have become very commonplace for current Marvel movies, mainly bad comedy and horrible action. However, this movie definitely is above recent Marvel releases like Ant-Man, Quantumanium, and Wakanda Forever. I also felt like this movie perfectly nailed its runtime, coming in at 2.5 hours on the dot, and for the most part, that time felt like it flew by, something I can't say for those previous Marvel movies. I also really enjoyed the villain in this movie and thought he was one of the best in the whole franchise. The High Evolutionary really brought a darker tone to the movie, and I wasn't expecting something like that from Marvel, but I rather enjoyed it. The High Evolutionary is also closely tied with Rocket Raccoon's backstory, and I really enjoyed finally seeing his origin play out. However, this is where my praises kind of end. Once again, I thought most of the comedy was pretty insufferable and not that funny, and takes the punch out a lot of these scenes. James Gunn does a great job of incorporating these extremely emotional scenes into the film that are almost immediately lessened by a joke played at the end that kind of fails to land, in my opinion, and just takes away the suspense from that whole scene. I will say that this is very common in most Marvel movies and definitely happens a lot less in this movie, but it becomes rather annoying as the film progresses and it starts to add up. The action was also a huge negative for me in this movie, as almost every action scene just feels like a bunch of CGI mess playing out on the screen. This has become harder and harder to ignore with Marvel as other action franchises like John Wick and Mission Impossible continue to push the limits as to what is possible with real practical action. Yet Marvel insists on these huge CGI messes. I will say, however, there is a hallway action scene near the end of this film that goes against the standard Marvel formula, and it's definitely the most memorable action scene for Marvel I've seen in the past couple years by far. But by that point in the story, I'd seen so much of this action mess on screen, it kind of diminished the effect that one hallway scene had on me. And there still is a lot of just CGI in that action scene. It just seems much more well thought out and executed. The ending of the movie also completely ends my interest in the Marvel Universe, which I'll get into in spoilers. But with all that being said, I did still enjoy this movie more than I didn't, and definitely think that this is a step in the right direction, while still being held back by many of the problems I've come to expect with the MCU. So I'll go ahead and skip to the time code on screen now for the final thoughts and rating of this movie as I go into spoilers here. So spoilers very quickly. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. So one of my biggest disappointments in this movie was definitely the character of Adam Warlock. I was a fan of his character from the games that have come out and the various solo stories and wanted to see where this live action version would go. And they immediately established early on that he is just a comic relief throwaway character and was played extremely dumb. And I was very upset with that decision, especially after hinting towards this character being a big plot. In the last Guardians post-credit scene, they showed Adam Warlock like being made and hinting that he would be a bigger part. And now finally getting to see him and realizing he's just a less funny and dumber version of Drax severely let me down. However, I do feel this movie made up for it with its shortcomings with the Rocket Raccoon backstory. And I have to say I was surprised how dark and gritty some of the scenes got. I was not expecting Disney to allow James Gunn to take the story in that direction, but I'm glad he did. It was something I had never seen from the MCU. The horrid animal mutations and experiments really had a good shock value and provided some extremely interesting story points that were highlights for me. Although I would have liked to see more of it since it was only really contained in a couple flashbacks, but those flashbacks are some of the best parts of this movie. The emotion of the movie also shined in a lot of points in here, namely when Rocket is nearly dying on the table and we see him talking to his animal friends from earlier that didn't make it out of their cages in the situation, ended up dying. Also, Peter Quill, played by Chris Pratt, Star-Lord there, great emotional acting to Rocket dying. You know, sitting there being invested in the scene and then after it sitting back and like, I just cared about a man screaming about a raccoon on a spaceship next to a tree really showed how well written some of these scenes are. And I was really happy to see some of that in a Marvel movie like this. I haven't seen anything like that before. My big problem with the story is that it feels incredibly dull in the middle. I thought the movie had a very good opening for about the first 40, 50 minutes, an hour. And I thought the ending was pretty decent, the last battle, so last about 20, 30 minutes. But in the middle, I found myself getting extremely bored, namely when they went to the Counter-Earth planet and the high evolutionary ship before it takes off and leads to that final battle. Lastly, the ending was decent as we see all of our main characters find a place where they can finally fit in and be happy, which is kind of this arc and theme that's been going since the first Guardians of the Galaxy and even through some of the Avengers movies. I enjoyed seeing these characters grow since their first appearance and felt most of them found a good landing spot to end this trilogy. Unfortunately, they tease what is going to be the new Guardians of the Galaxy at the end of this, what they're going to become, and it's a major letdown. In the first post-credit scene, we see the new Guardians of the Galaxy, which is going to consist of Rocket and Groot, Adam Warlock, and a pet he found, Cosmo, the dog from the Christmas special, and a kid they saved at the end of the movie, and Kraglin. This really kind of highlights my current problem with the MCU, and what took me out of it to begin with is that these supporting characters are being hoisted up into main character positions, and they just don't feel fleshed out enough to take over these spots. I know that certain actors went out of their contracts, and you're going to have to write out those characters, but make new characters with interesting actors that can bring something to that. Don't take the comic relief characters that act dumb and are on the sidelines and then put these in bigger roles. I don't feel like they work as well. That's why some of those early movies were so good, because they had strong main characters. So to sum it up, I did find Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 to be rather enjoyable at times and a fitting ending to the Guardians trilogy. I would put this as the second best Guardians movie, a little bit behind the first, but miles ahead of the second. While I can't say I'm looking forward to the future of the MCU, I can say that these characters had fitting endings to their stories and arcs, and I'm going to give Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 a 7 out of 10. Thank you guys for tuning in for another review. Again, if you want to add any comments to the discussion or ask about what I thought about certain parts of the movies, feel free to leave that in the comment below. If you're enjoying the content you're seeing, please consider leaving a like and subscribing, and I will see you in the next review.